Well, we're joined now by Sir Gerald Howarth, who is a former UK Defence Minister and joins us now from Suffolk in the United Kingdom. Sir Gerald, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us once again. We're 4 years into this war, both sides, the Ukrainians, the Russians, sounding resolute. Just to start with, what do you think has changed on the battlefield during the course of the past year?
Well, hello there, Tom. Yes, this is a pretty dismal day for anybody who believes in democracy and anybody who believes in civilization. This is the 4th anniversary of the most brutal Russian invasion of a sovereign state to which they had signed up to respect its borders and its territorial sovereignty and so on in 1995. And we are witnessing this utterly brutal targeting of civilians, abducting of children, subjecting the population of Ukraine to blackouts, no power supply, the coldest winter for decades. And what has happened over the past year is basically it's been a stalemate. The Russians have failed to conquer Ukraine. They've failed to take any more territory. In fact, since the initial invasion, this time 4 years ago, of course, the Russians have been driven back. And it is absolutely disgusting. And we do have to stand firm with the Ukrainians. Of course, what has helped to fuel Russia's determination is the failure of the United States to side unequivocally with Ukraine. And that has emboldened Putin. He will carry on as long as he feels he can behave in this appalling manner with impunity.
I mean, just to sort of look at the situation on the battlefield, and we'll talk a bit more about peace talks and peace efforts in a moment. Russia occupies, it's thought, about 20% of Ukrainian territory. It's also reported that Russia has made greater gains in the past year than in the 2 previous years combined. I don't know if that tallies with the information you have, albeit those gains fairly small. But do you see momentum shifting at all on the battlefield?
I don't think so. And I think as long as the West continues to provide Ukraine with weapons to repel Russians, the longer this will go on. The United Kingdom has just today announced a whole raft of new sanctions on Russian oil companies. Goodness knows why this wasn't done on day one, but anyway, it's being done today. And the Russian economy must be in a very parlous state because there's nothing that the Russians produce that even those of you out in the Gulf would want to buy. I mean, do we want to buy a Russian car? We want to buy a Russian television? No, we certainly don't. The only thing that Russia produces that might interest us is vodka. The rest is pretty shoddy stuff. And therefore, the country relies overwhelmingly on export of oil and gas. And there it is true that President Trump has been somewhat successful in warning countries which import oil and gas from Russia that they will be penalized by the United States. So there are some commentators here in London who are saying that the Russian economy really is teetering on the brink. And much of their supplies are coming from countries like Iran and North Korea. Wonderful proponents of democracy, of course, those two countries are. So it is a stalemate at the moment. And I don't think, I'm certainly not getting any information here to suggest that the Russians have made enormous advances in the last year or so.
According to reports, Russian media, Russian television channels barely made any mention of today, this 4th anniversary of the start of that war. What do you think that tells us about the domestic narrative relating to the situation in Ukraine?
Well, it tells us 2 things: that there isn't a free press in Russia, that the only news that people get is from the state broadcaster, which of course is controlled by Putin and his cronies. So they will only get the message that they want to get. And of course, that message is a complete lie. The message that's being relayed to them is that Russia is under threat and that Ukraine is full of Nazis and they've got to denazify Ukraine, and that's what the Russians are doing. I mean, it's just such an overwhelming lie. But that is not the only problem. The other problem is that the Russian people, to the extent they do understand what is going on, they have some sympathy with Putin, because they share Putin's resentment that since the fall of the Berlin Wall, some 40 years ago, that that Russia has really fallen from grace. It doesn't command the respect around the world. It's not a powerful country. It's about the 21st or 22nd largest economy in the world. It's way down the league table. Okay, they may continue to remain a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, and they have nuclear weapons. But there's not much else to Russia. And so the Russians are a proud people. Of course, the whole thing is a complete tragedy. We're fellow Christians. This shouldn't be happening at all, but they share Putin's resentment that their country is not not one of the leading countries in the world, unlike the European countries, the United States and China, and they resent that. So you have these two factors: the fact that the message they receive is completely controlled by the Kremlin, and secondly, that they share some of Putin's resentment.
Now, so Gerald, I don't think you've been to Russia in recent years, but you have been to Ukraine on more than one occasion, and you've told us about that in the past. I don't know when your last visit was, but what have you garnered from your most recent visits to Ukraine about how morale is holding up? Are there any cracks emerging in public support for President Zelenskyy, for example?
That's a very good question, Tom, and one which I do continue to ask. I was last in Odessa in June last year, and before that I'd been part of a convoy of 14 second-hand 4x4s which we'd taken out to Ukraine and sent those to the front line to help support the Ukrainian troops. And I did ask that question: are you prepared to give up territory in order to secure peace? And I was quite struck by how many people said they were not prepared to give up territory. And it isn't just about territory, it is about a way of life. And why should Zelenskyy, President Zelenskyy, basically betray 20% of his population, hand them over to a brutal regime which has shown no humanity whatever? Why should he hand them over? And why should we in the West encourage him so to do? If the Ukrainian people felt that that is something that they ought to do in order to achieve the peace that they want, then that is a matter for them. And it's not for me to tell them what to do. But I was struck by how many of them did tell me that they were prepared to see this through. And interesting, in Lviv in Western Ukraine, where I was, the restaurants were full, people were having a good time. And I had a meeting with the deputy commander of the military base in Lviv. And I said, it's quite surprising sitting here in Lviv as I am and enjoying the restaurants and the bars and so on. And, is this not something that jars with what's going on the front line? And he said, on the contrary, we believe that people should be able to have time off from the front line and enjoy themselves, and that life should go on. I also say that what the Ukrainians are doing to support their wounded veterans is pretty state-of-the-art stuff, very impressive. They are really a beacon to the rest of the world. They are under the thumb of Moscow. They are being brutally treated, and yet they are standing solidly for freedom and democracy. And we should be very proud of them for doing that and raise a glass to them today for their stoicism, their courage, their resilience. And then we should do everything we possibly can to help them. And I perhaps can remind your viewers that had it not been for the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Ukraine would already be under Russian occupation across the whole country. It was Boris Johnson who woke up the rest of the world, particularly US President Joe Biden at the time. But also we had supplied anti-tank NLAW weapons to Ukraine, and that was an initiative which enabled the Ukrainians to take out all those Russian tanks parked outside Kyiv. So we in the United Kingdom have played our part and continue to do so. But it now requires, in 2026, we've had enough of this. We've had enough of Russian brutality. We've had enough of Russia posturing in this way and threatening the rest of the world. We need now to put every effort into helping the Ukrainians rid their country of every single Russian. Apparently 325,000 Russians have died. Indeed, I heard on the radio this morning that Russian soldiers being forced to go into the front line, what was effectively regarded by them as a suicide mission, refused to do so and were shot by their own people. I mean, this is a disgusting regime. And furthermore, if Putin wins here, he has made it crystal clear this is only the start. He intends to rebuild the Soviet Union. That is what he said in 2021, and he's doing it.
And I just wanted to ask you, I mean, President Zelenskyy is quoted as saying, World War III has actually already begun, he said in a recent interview. Do you think it has, or do you think we're perhaps drifting in that direction?
No, this is not World War III. This is a dispute between Russia and Ukraine, a sovereign state, which is supported by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, supported by NATO. It doesn't involve the UAE, it doesn't involve Bahrain, it doesn't involve the Philippines, it doesn't involve Ecuador. This is not a world war. It doesn't involve Australia. They are not sending troops there. They're supporting but not sending troops. So this is not a world war. And I heard today that apparently the Kremlin is putting it about that Britain and France are planning to arm Ukraine with nuclear weapons. Well, I mean, it is one lie after another. And if people cannot understand that this man has got to go, that this regime in Moscow has got to go, it has got to be checked. We are where we are today because we have allowed Putin to act with impunity in 2008, when he annexed part of Georgia, 2014, when he annexed Crimea, then a part of Ukraine. And he just goes on and on until he is thwarted and stopped. And that is the only way to secure peace on the continent of Europe. He is an evil man. He is in charge of an evil regime. And it is in our national interest and the national interest of our European friends that this man and his evil regime are stopped in their tracks, and that every single Russian is expelled from the sovereign state of Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
The US-led peace talks and efforts seem like they're pretty deadlocked on the same old issue of territory. Listening to what you were just saying there and what you said earlier about the talks, I mean, do you see any realistic pathway towards some sort of a peace deal this year? President Trump saying he wants a deal to be secured by June. Is that at all realistic?
Well, President Trump talks in these transactional terms all the time. Everything is a deal for him. It's like a property deal. This is not the way you conduct international politics. It's certainly not the way you conduct a military issue of this magnitude. No, the United States has given comfort and succor to Putin all the way, giving him a red carpet treatment in Alaska, utterly nauseating. His treatment of President Zelenskyy in the White House a year ago was reprehensible. And he has basically taken Putin's line all the way. So from Putin's point of view, yes, bring on the talks. Just postpones any likelihood of peace. It kicks it into the long grass, gives them more time to commit more atrocities, abduct more children, destroy more of mainland Ukraine than they have already done, and they do it with basically the connivance of the President of the United States of America. And I think it is absolutely and utterly unforgivable. And for the leader of the free world to be seen to be so indulgent of a brutal aggressor like Putin is utterly shameful and is a repudiation of all that we have stood for in the West this past 80 years since the end of the Second World War.
One of the comments the British Prime Minister has made today, Sir Keir Starmer, said that Ukraine's allies must, quote, shift the narrative away from the idea that Russia is winning. I just want to ask you about that narrative. Where are we hearing it? And do you think there is perhaps, as an extension of that question, a dip in popular support, public support for this ongoing war, given that it's expensive and economies across Europe, including the United Kingdom, are struggling at the moment?
That's also a very good question, Tom. What is striking here is the continuing support that there is for the bipartisan approach taken by the two major parties in the United Kingdom. I leave Reform on one side because they're very ambivalent about Putin. But the two main parties have been resilient on this. And I think it's extraordinary the support the British people continue to give. I did this convoy of 14 4x4, second-hand 4x4s, which we took out to Ukraine last summer. And we each of us had to raise £10,000. My co-driver is our former spy who managed to extradite Gordievsky out of Moscow when his cover was blown. Raymond and I each raised over £10,000. And the latest trip, which took place last week, raised £400,000. There continues to be an appetite to support in the United Kingdom. It may not be the same elsewhere in Europe, particularly Hungary, where President Orban seems to be much more favorably disposed towards Putin. The Czech Republic the same. So we do have a problem, and the idea that the European Union can act as one has been proven to be completely fatuous. The European Union is not a country. It is not capable of being a country, and the sooner they recognise that, the better. So, but the truth is, the combination of an indulgent president of the United States of America and a feeble European group of countries has resulted in Putin being able to get away with this with impunity.
So can I just interrupt you then, just to wrap up, because we're about to end, and I want to pick up on this point, because I know you were a strong supporter of Brexit. But I'm just wondering, and just listening to what you're saying there, whether you think that given today's geopolitical reality, there is an argument to be made for closer European integration, the UK perhaps rejoining Europe on slightly different terms, and giving the body the leadership you seem to think it's lacking.
Absolutely no way. It will be a disaster. We have liberated ourselves from a defunct 1950s construct, which has no relevance today. No, what I mean when I talk about Europe getting together, I mean the European members of NATO, not the EU. Emphatically not the EU. I was the defense minister in the United Kingdom responsible for our defense interests within the European Union. And they couldn't organize themselves in a brewery. It was pathetic. NATO is what has secured the peace in Europe until now. NATO is the instrument. It binds America in. It includes Canada. And the European members of NATO and Canada have now got to step up to the plate, as they have been warned to do both by David Cameron, UK Prime Minister in 2014, by Donald Trump in his first administration, and more recently, of course, in his second administration. The European members of NATO have got to step up to the plate. Our Prime Minister talks about, going to 2.5% of GDP on defence. In 1982, when we had the Falklands War, we were spending 5% of GDP on defence. and we had 330,000 soldiers, 330,000 members of our armed forces. We have about 140,000 today. The people of Britain, like the people on the continent, have got to wake up, and they have got to recognize that if we are to remain free countries, we have got to provide ourselves with a means to resist aggression. Okay. There are some countries who understand that, and they are, unsurprisingly, the countries which share a border with Russia, the Baltic states, Poland, and Finland in particular. And so the idea that we should waste time trying to get back into some sort of EU regime is absolutely for the birds. No way whatsoever. But we are important. We are one of the biggest military countries in within Europe. The Europeans cannot do it without us, whatever the posturing in other capitals may be. And we need to do it through the means of NATO. It has all the arrangements, all the protocols, all the standardization. NATO is the instrument.
All right.
It's just the European members of NATO need to get together.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much. We're out of time. Sir Gerald Howarth, former UK Defence Minister, thank you very much indeed for your time.
My pleasure.